Hey there, I'm Rachel Ehring, and you're listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast. Get inspired as we discuss creative resources, trends in piano pedagogy, ways to grow your income and streamline your studio, and new ways to engage your students each week. If you are a teacher who wants to go beyond the method books to create an innovative studio that fosters lifelong music makers, you've come to the right place. Hello, my piano teacher friends. I am so glad that you're listening today. It means so much to me to know that piano teachers around the world are listening to the podcast, and I just love being here every week to hopefully inspire you and bring on guests that will help you along your piano teacher journey. Today, it is just me here at the microphone, although as I'm recording this in my office, there are dozens of preschoolers playing right outside my window. So if you hear any screaming in the background, don't worry, they are just having fun out there. If you listened to last week's episode, I talked with Sonia Poon about preparing students, particularly tweens and teens, for performances and dealing with performance anxiety. After that interview, I felt like we had barely scratched the surface, and she had so much great advice that I decided to do a piggyback episode this week to continue some of the threads that we started last week. I'm going to be diving in deeper into preparing for a performance, from what you need to do weeks and even months ahead of time to what you need to do on the day of the actual performance. And all of these things are applicable whether you yourself are performing or if you are helping your students prepare for a performance. So let's get started with preparation. Some people will say that if you are nervous for a performance, it's because you haven't prepared well. Personally, I don't fully agree with that. I think that nerves are always going to be a part of performing. And there are certain situations where I get nervous no matter how well prepared I am. However, I think preparation is a big part of how we feel leading up to a performance, and it is much easier to trick our brains into being calm if we know that we have prepared well. So most of what I'm going to talk about today really is about preparation rather than the actual performance. One of the things that Sonia and I talked about last week was the value of having a preparation timeline or calendar, whether it's for yourself, for your own performance, or for your students. This is just like if you were preparing for, let's say, a big test, and you outlined what you were going to study each week leading up to the test. I talked last week about how when I was in grad school, I would make a timeline leading up to my graduate recitals. There were times during my doctorate when I was doing a full-length recital every semester, which meant I didn't have a lot of time to prepare the music. These were collaborative recitals. So I not only had to learn my part, but I had to make sure that I was well rehearsed with my singers or instrumentalists. And sometimes I even had to kind of keep them on track with learning their parts. So when I made my timeline, I would work backwards from the recital date. Let's say my recital was at the end of April. I would put the date in my calendar, and then I would typically schedule a dress rehearsal at the same time. By the way, here's a little side note. If you are working with students who are doing full recitals, make sure that they put the dress rehearsal on the calendar at the same time that they schedule the recital. Students often think that they can wait until the week before and then just throw a dress rehearsal on the calendar, and then they find out that the recital hall isn't available or other people who need to be there aren't available. Dress rehearsals are a really important part of feeling prepared, so get it on the schedule. So anyway, I would put the dress rehearsal on the calendar, and then I would work backwards and say before the dress rehearsal, I want to play all 4 pieces in my performance class. But before I play them in performance class, I want to take each piece into my lessons a couple of times. But before I can take them into my lessons, I have to have rehearsed them with my partners. But before I can rehearse them with my partners, I have to know my part. So according to my calculations, I needed to start practicing, yesterday. And so it put everything into perspective of what I needed to be doing right at that moment. So that will help you get the big picture of preparation. But now let's talk about some of the details. There are a number of ways that you or your students can prepare for a performance. But one of the things I always tell my students is don't let a big performance be the first time you perform a piece. What I mean by that is when you walk on stage, don't let that be the first time that anyone has heard you perform that piece. I remember one time, this is kind of a horror story, I'll tell you. I was accompanying 2 trumpet players for a competition, and they had to perform by memory. They were doing a trumpet duet together with piano accompaniment. Every time they came into my office to rehearse, I would say, "Is it memorized yet?" And they would always say, "Oh yeah, it's memorized, but I'm just going to put my music here on the stand just in case." I tried and tried to get them to put the music away, but they kept assuring me it was memorized. I was a lot younger then, not as experienced, and probably not as bossy, so I let them get away with it. Well, you can probably imagine what happened on the day of the performance. When they walked on the stage for the competition, it was the first time that they didn't have that little music crutch sitting on the stand. And first one of them had a memory slip, and then the other one had a memory slip. And before I knew it, the whole thing had fallen to pieces and turned into a big hot mess. So now, if I have a student who's going to play by memory, you better believe that music is going out of sight. There are whole podcasts and other resources about memorizing music, so I'm not going to get into all of that here. But especially if a student is performing by memory, make sure they have performed it many times in many different situations by memory before the big performance. Even if you aren't playing by memory, it's important to perform your piece many times before the big performance. And there are a number of ways that you can emulate the nerves of a performance situation when preparing for that performance. Of course, you can perform for anyone who will listen. It might be a family member, a friend, a neighbor. I tell my students they can even perform for their dog or line up their stuffed animals and then go through all of the motions of walking up, sitting at the piano, playing their piece, and bowing. Technology also provides more options now for us than ever before. Sonia talked about having her students send her a video midweek as a checkup on their progress. And if you listened to the podcast 2 weeks ago with Will Armstrong, he talked about how he is building an entire music teaching business around the idea of sending videos back and forth. So you can have students make a video to send to their grandparents, or if you are preparing for a performance, maybe make a video to put on your Instagram stories. It only lasts 24 hours, so no pressure, right? Another thing that Sonia mentioned was practicing in the performance space ahead of time if possible. When I was in undergrad doing my piano performance degree, we had a large auditorium where we would usually do our big recitals. So sometimes in the evenings when most people were, in their dorms studying or whatever, I would go in there to practice for my recital. And I remember so vividly how it would make me nervous, even if no one was in there. And in that particular space, there was a balcony and it was pretty dark at night. So I never really knew if someone might be up there listening. And it was such great preparation for the recital. When I walked on that stage for my recitals, I knew that I had been there on that stage at that piano many times before, and I had played my pieces in the space, and it gave me the confidence to keep walking out on stage and sit down at the piano and do it again. With kids in particular, I want them to walk onto the stage, practice their bows, practice adjusting the bench, putting their music up, getting everything just right, playing their piece, bowing, and walking off stage. I have this tiny little student. He's about 6, and he actually loves this part of recital preparation. We've turned it into a whole game where even if we're just in my office, he'll go outside my office door and I'll use my best announcer voice to announce his name and the song that he's going to be playing. And then he'll come marching in and sit down and play his song. And then, of course, I clap and cheer so he can take his best little man bow. And he loves this routine. He actually begs to do it even when we're not preparing for a recital. So there's something about walking through the whole thing that mentally makes it easier when you walk onto that stage for the actual performance. And with this little boy, no joke, we'll do this probably, 30 times in the weeks leading up to his recital performances. And he's done awesome at his recitals. Something that I've been doing in several areas of my life, not just performing, is using affirmations to get myself into a better mental space. Now, this might sound a little too woo for some of you, but I think with young performers, as well as for us as adults, it can be really useful to transform the negative self-talk that's in our head and the imposter syndrome that gets in there, sometimes without us even realizing it. Rather than telling kids, you don't need to be nervous or you're going to do great, what if we do some affirmations with them? I recently posted a YouTube video called Affirmations for Student Musicians that I'll link in the show notes. And I actually have another one called Affirmations for Performing Musicians, and they really are interchangeable. But you could do this at the beginning or end of a lesson, or I've done it in a performance class where students are preparing for a recital. And I just have the students close their eyes, take a couple of deep, relaxing breaths, and then you say an affirmation and they repeat it in their head. So you might say, my music brings joy to others, or I have practiced diligently. I am calm and composed. It helps students internalize a healthy view of performing. I recently had an adult student doing a Zoom lesson, and I could tell immediately when we got on the call that she was a ball of nerves and wasn't going to play her best. So I just stopped. I had her close her eyes, take some deep breaths, and it just changed the whole feel of the lesson. With kids, I like to focus on the fact that they are sharing their music with people who love them and are excited to be there. I think this maybe is a little trickier if a student is doing a competition or exams where technically they are getting judged. But even then, I believe it's our job to help them frame it in a way that shows them that we are all on the same team. That even though that person might be called a judge, they're giving feedback to help the student grow musically and improve their skills. We all want the students to succeed. If you have older students who are struggling with performance anxiety, you can talk about breathing and even doing some breathing activities such as box breathing before performing. I remember my piano teacher in college always reminding me to breathe while I was playing. And it really is an important part of calming our nervous system. And sometimes having something to focus on, such as our breath, is exactly what we need to calm our nerves. We need to let students know that stage fright and being nervous is completely normal and that everyone feels this way. We also need to let them know ways to work through it and still be confident. One of the best ways to learn to deal with nerves is to just keep doing the thing that makes you nervous over and over again. Our good friend Taylor Swift says, in my opinion, the only way to conquer stage fright is to get up on stage and play. Every time you play another show, it gets better and better. Thank you, Taylor, for that advice. Imagine if you were playing a Broadway show and you played the exact same show 8 times a week for multiple weeks in a row. You might still have some butterflies when you get up to do the show, but you would be confident probably by week 2, maybe sooner, of playing that show. The more performance opportunities or even pseudo-performance opportunities, such as playing for friends or your stuffed animals, or pretending to perform in a recital, the more confident our students will become. We've talked a lot about preparing before a performance. Let's talk just a little about the day of the performance. I like to have a good warm-up routine that includes scales and just warming up my fingers and then playing the performance music slowly with the score. My undergrad teacher always encouraged me not to play by memory on the day of the performance because at that point, if you have a memory slip in your warm-up, it's going to mess you up mentally. So just playing slowly with music is going to help your nerves and your mind more than anything. Everyone has their own day of routine. I do want to add in one more thing that actually happens before the day of the performance. Make sure that all the little details are taken care of as much as possible well in advance so that you aren't worrying about printing programs or baking cookies or picking up your dress from the dry cleaners on the day of the performance. When I was a college accompanist, I can't tell you how many students would wait until the night before the recital to finish writing their program notes. It drove me nuts. Don't be that person. But back to the day of the performance. Sonia talked about having a lucky pair of socks or something that makes you feel grounded and confident. For me, I always like to pop an Altoid or a mint in my mouth before I go on stage. And then I tell myself, depending on the length of the performance, that by the time it's dissolved, I'll be done and on my way to enjoy the reception. I do want to talk a little bit briefly about how to respond to a student who is unhappy with his or her performance, because our reaction in those situations is important to these young kids, and we've probably all encountered this. I actually asked my piano teacher friend, Tweena, how she handles those situations, and she had such great advice. She said that she asks the student, "Did you try your best?" And almost always the student will respond that yes, they tried their best. To which Tweena responds, "That is all anyone can ask of you, and I am so proud of you." I love that response. Just encouraging them. I think sometimes I also try to reframe it as, you shared your music with the people that love you, and they heard beautiful music coming from your heart. They don't care about a missed note or a forgotten word. You brought them joy through your music. These are just some of my thoughts and strategies from my many years of performing. I hope that you heard something today that you can implement either with your own performances or with your students.
Hey everyone, it's Tim here, and I've worked with music teachers like you for over 10 years now. And in that time, I've really got to know the challenges you face and the struggles and pain points that you feel on a daily basis. Whether that's to do with students who don't practice, or you're struggling with low retention, perhaps feeling overwhelmed and burnt out, not having enough time for your studio admin, or not feeling like you're keeping up with technology. At Top Music, we feel that pain and we understand you. And that's why over the last 10 years or so, we've worked tirelessly and shared thousands of downloads, lesson ideas, videos, and articles to help answer questions and support you to solve these problems. Inside Top Music Pro as well, we've recorded more than 30 comprehensive multi-module training courses, shared hundreds of quick wins, interviews, workshops, and studio downloads, and given away 15 volumes of free sheet music. We've covered everything from teaching beginners to playing lead sheets to special needs teaching to studio marketing to Facebook advertising to group teaching, and now our newly updated course showing you exactly how to build a studio website from scratch. So we know the challenge isn't now about finding answers to your questions. It's about implementation and taking action. It's about working out what to do and finding the time to just make a start on it. In fact, just yesterday I heard from two members talking about their struggles to take action. And one of them said, "I'm overwhelmed with overdue admin and have no motivation to tackle it." And another who said, "I need to stop making plans to change my business and actually start making change to my business." You see, we've realized that one of the biggest barriers to solving your pain points and making lasting change in your teaching and studio business is now not lack of information, it's lack of time, organization, and accountability. It's just like when people set a goal to work out at the gym. We could all go to a gym and ask a personal trainer to set a training plan for us, but how do we find the motivation to actually attend the gym week after week? Gyms rely on the fact that many members never actually attend, but keep paying their dues out of guilt or that feeling of, maybe I'll go next week. And so that's why people who want to make an impact in the gym and with their health will either agree to meet up with a friend or hire a personal trainer to hold them accountable for being there and getting the work done. By providing a group of people and regular check-ins, the accountability keeps you making progress. So if you've been struggling to implement changes in your studio, if you've been struggling to work out what to do first when there are so many exciting ideas out there, or if you've been needing a push to set aside the time to implement the ideas that you know will make a difference for your students, then we've developed a solution for you. And what is it? Well, it's called Power Hours, and it's an exclusive service we're implementing free for our Top Music Pro members. It's an online accountability group that will give you focus and momentum to achieve the things you want to achieve and almost guarantee that you'll make progress. So here's how it's going to work. What we're going to do is set up 3 sessions each week in time zones to suit teachers in countries around the United States and in Europe and the Australian time zones, where you'll come together on a Zoom call for 1 hour of your own productive work time. We'll have a Top Music team member running each session, and they'll do a quick 5-minute check-in at the start, and then everyone's going to mute their microphones and get to work. We'll be giving you a printed tracking sheet to help you set and track goals during each session. So what will you do for the hour? Well, it's up to you. You may choose to work through a course that you started and perhaps never finished, or perhaps you'd like to set aside an hour a week to do your own practice. How cool would that be? Or maybe this will be the time when you update your studio website or batch write your social media post. It's totally up to you. Whatever you want to do, this is your time to get it done. There's no teaching your content from us, and we're not there to answer questions. It's just about being there for you and holding you accountable for getting the work done. At the end of the session, your team leader will wrap things up and encourage you to fill out your tracking sheet to prepare for your next session. And the great thing is you can join as many sessions as you'd like during the week, depending on the best times for you and the time zones you're in. You can find out more about the available Power Hour times and how to register on this page. I strongly encourage all members to take advantage of this free new accountability and motivation service. In the same way that gym goers with personal trainers or those attending group classes will tend to make more progress, joining a Top Music Power Hour each week will have a marked impact on your ability to get things done and to enjoy that satisfaction of a super productive hour of work, whatever form that may take for you. I can't wait to see what you achieve.
I would love to hear your thoughts on preparing students for performing or how you prepare yourself for a performance. You can find me over on Instagram at Rachel Ehring. Thank you so much for listening today. Next week, we're going to be starting the topic of creativity in teaching. I'm really excited about this one. It's one of my favorite things, and I have some great guests lined up. But you're going to have to tune in next week to find out more. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will talk with you again very soon.
How do you keep up to date with all the latest trends and research into music education? How do you connect with other teachers around the world and make sure your teaching stays fresh and relevant for students of all ages and stages, both now and into the future? I created our Top Music Pro membership to be the one-stop shop for music teaching resources, training, support, and community, and I'd love for you to come and join us inside. With over 40 comprehensive training courses, hundreds of teaching demonstrations and lesson plans, free monthly sheet music, discounts, and all the business and pedagogy support you could ever need, Top Music Pro is the community you've been looking for. If you're ready to level up your learning from the podcast and join thousands of other teachers in our global network, head over to topmusicpro.com today.